USA, pressure washer perfection.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Kranzle USA. This is the original Josh, and today we're taking a look at variable pressure washer nozzles. So we're going to take a look at 3 variable nozzles today, starting out with the Kranzle Vario Nozzle and a couple of cheapies, you know, some knockoffs that are out in the market, but definitely not anywhere near as good. And we're not just going to tell you that, we're going to show it to you with a couple tests. So, but first let's talk about what a variable nozzle is and how it works. Your pressure washers are often equipped with a low pressure soap injector, which requires you to drop the pressure down in order to get the chemical injector to siphon detergent. And that's where the variable nozzle comes into play. By pulling out on the variable nozzle, we go from the high pressure position with our smaller orifice nozzle. Once it goes into the low pressure position, water is then going around the high pressure nozzle through the low pressure nozzle, resulting in low enough pressure to cause the chemical injector to siphon. This also has the functionality to give you a fan spray. By turning the collar of the nozzle, you adjust these fins on the inside, and that's what changes the straight stream into a fan pattern. All 3 of the nozzles are designed the same, but the quality is definitely not the same. I mean, come on, Kranzle's the best, right? We're gonna do some tests today. We're going to compare all 3 nozzles with a high pressure distance test, a low pressure distance test, and a paint test to see what kind of spray pattern that we're getting, how precise that spray pattern is, so that to measure our cleaning efficiency. So let's go take a look. So in our first test, we tested the Kranzle Vario nozzle in our high pressure distance test. So under a high pressure function, we shot from about 12 feet away from the wall and tried to see how far we could reach, you know, how high of a distance we were gonna reach and how clean the pattern was when it reaches the wall. And with the Kranzle Vario nozzle, we find that we get really nice solid distance, and the spray pattern is nice and tight. It's not starting to get overspray, wandering out. We're getting getting the majority of our water stream right there to a pinpoint spot on the wall. So we've got a pretty good performance there with our Vario nozzle. Once again, this is just to show you the precision and distance of the Kranzle Vario nozzle. So now we're gonna take a look at the same test with knockoff number 1. So we just finished up with the high pressure distance test for contender number 1. And while we did get the similar distance and precision of stream, we found that some of the airflow coming through the nozzle allows that stream to walk a little bit, which I don't like. So while this contender doesn't do quite as bad, it's only getting a B- against the Kranzle in my book. So now let's take a look at knockoff number 2. All right, so we took a look at contender number 2, and let me tell you, this makes a great misting station for my kids, but I'm not using it for that. It's a pressure washer nozzle. So the water stream, by the time that it got to the surface, was just starting to atomize and go everywhere, and that's not what the pressure washer is intended to do. We need to get that nice solid stream to hit the surface whenever it's in the stream setting. So this wimpy little contender here has gotten a D- on this particular test. So next test, we're going to start back over with the Kranzle nozzle, and we're going to see how well it does in a low pressure distance test. So let's go take a look at what that does. So that was our low pressure stream test. We took our nozzle, actuated it in a low pressure position so that we can apply chemical if we choose. So likewise with our previous test, we're doing the same test in the same ways with all 3 nozzles. So with this one right here, we saw that from about 12 feet from the wall, we were hitting about 12 feet off the ground. So if I were holding that nozzle right next to the house and I'm shooting up to try to hit the top of my siding on my house, I'm gonna get a good 18 to 20 feet from the ground to be able to apply my chemical stream. So pretty good job from Kranzle Vario Nozzle. So now we're going to do the same test with knockoff number 1. Let's see how it does. So that was the low pressure test for knockoff number 1. We popped it into the low pressure position and we saw the distance that we could get with the nozzle. What we found with this nozzle, it still hit about the same spot on the wall, but we were getting a little more arcing. So what that's telling me is that I'm going to get a little less distance with this if I'm trying to shoot up and hit the peak of my siding from the ground. So this didn't do an awful job, but I'm still calling it a B-. So now we're going to do the rinse stream test with knockoff number 2. All right guys, did you see that? In our low pressure test, this thing barely shot water 6 feet. I mean, how are you going to soap up the side of your house from this nozzle without having to climb up a ladder and get right next to the siding? That's not an acceptable performance as far as I'm concerned. So we had a D- for this nozzle before, but it's a failing grade at this point. We're going to now refer to this one as Wimpy. So we're gonna put Wimpy back and we're gonna move on to our final tests. So next we have our paint test for the Vario nozzle. Let's take a look.
Kranzle USA. Pressure washer perfection.
All right guys, so nobody likes watching paint dry, but we don't like having to watch the paint be peeled off the surface either. So we've sped up the clips for this paint test. They were all 30 seconds for all 3 nozzles, but we sped those up so that you can see the overall cleaning performance of each of the nozzles. And with our Vario nozzle, you know, it isn't the best nozzle for cleaning paint, but we did get a really good idea of how even that pattern is and how well it's gonna clean dirt from the surface without doing it unevenly. We got a nice, you know, the Vario nozzle took about the same amount of paint off the surface the whole way. So even if it's not the right nozzle for removing paint, the Kranzle Vario nozzle did a damn good job. So now we're going to take a look at contender number 1. All right, so we just did our paint test and what was originally a B- nozzle now gets a D. I mean, it barely touched anything. So this thing, we're done with it. Now we move on to Wimpy. All right guys, so Wimpy finally showed up for the final test. We did get some actually decent performance out of the paint test from the Wimpy nozzle. But the reason that we were able to take off a similar amount of paint to the Vario nozzle, the Kranzle Vario nozzle, was because the stream was coming out a little more intense in one particular area, and that area being focused on the paint was giving us a little more cleaning impact. So yeah, showed up, but it still wasn't the performance that we're looking for from our Vario nozzle. So there you go. Our conclusion is the Kranzle Vario nozzle is the best. Our 2 cheapies were able to show up in different parts of our test, but you gotta buy both of those at a greater expense than the Kranzle Vario to get the same work done. So don't bother with them, stick with the best. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your questions in the comments section below, and always remember, Kranzle, better than cheap.
Kranzle USA. Pressure washer perfection.